Hello, my name is Chad Wooters, and today I'm going to share with you some of the basic concepts from my book, Fast and Flexible. In it, I present an organizing framework of 4 basic oil painting techniques. This organizing framework neatly summarizes the best practices of historic painting methods for realism. This includes the Impressionists, the Pre-Raphaelites, Tonal realism, and classical realism. There are 2 basic strategies for depicting form. The first is vague to clear, and we're going to represent that with a cloud of tonal values. The second strategy for depicting form is simple to complex. And here we're going to depict that with outlines. There are 2 basic approaches to color. The first is to focus on the hues, and define objects by their hues. For that, I'm going to represent it with just a very quick depiction of a face or a portrait. The second approach to color is to focus on tonal values. So in this case, you would use all of the same hue, when you take the strategies for depicting form and you cross-reference them with the approach to color, you get 4 basic painting styles. The first uses a vague to clear strategy for depicting form and has a hue priority. This is the style of most Impressionists. The second painting technique uses a simple to complex strategy for depicting form and focuses on hue. This is the method favored by the Pre-Raphaelites. The third basic painting technique focuses on tonal values and uses a vague to clear strategy for depicting form. This is the style used by Sargent, Zorn, and also describes the methods of the Spanish painting schools. The fourth basic oil painting technique also relies heavily on tonal values and uses the strategy for depicting form of simple to complex. This is the style of painting that is today called classical realism. When I wrote Fast and Flexible, the idea was not to write just another oil painting instruction manual, but to teach people how to make artistic choices. As a part-time artist, I found that I had a very limited amount of time in which to work. My methods had to make the best possible use of the time available to me and remain flexible, so that if I could pick it up and start again and set it aside, and work at different hours, whatever the need was at that time. For instance, in this painting that I'm working on right now, I'm not using just one particular style. I'm actually going to be using at least 3 of them. So I started with a tonal realist approach in the underpainting, because that's the way I like to work. I like to work from the vague to clear generally, and I like to focus on tonal values. But for the block end, I've switched to a more Pre-Raphaelite approach. I focused on color and blocking out the color areas. There is some tonal value work, but generally the focus there is on getting the correct hue. When I get to the final stages, I might find myself switching over to a more classical realist approach. For instance, this is a very complicated shape. of this 3D home stereoscope. It's a very complicated shape. Using the vague to clear approach, yes, it can be done, but it would be much easier for me to define the shape with outlines before I actually try to fill it in. And also in the final stages, I'd like to use some glazes, particularly for this pottery here and some of the shiny portions, some of the deep background. I want to use some glazing techniques. Those glazing techniques are more in line with the classical realist approach. Now, if you were learning just a single painting method, say learning how to paint like an Impressionist or one of the contemporary masters such as David Lafell or Greg Kreutz, you would learn a particular way of working. Other artists, from taking workshops, you acquire a bag of tricks, but how do you integrate those together? That's what I'm trying to do. I'm presenting you with a framework so you can take all those techniques and say, well, okay, this technique here that I'm using actually is more in line with the Pre-Raphaelite approach. This other technique is more in line with the Tonal Realist approach. And you can fit all of your knowledge together into a clear, organized framework. When this painting is done, it really won't matter what approach I took, what method of depicting form. It won't matter whether my approach was to color was based more on hue and tonal values. As the picture becomes more and more realistic, all those techniques move towards a single focus, and that is to make things as realistic looking as possible. So you'll find that the truly great artists, it's very difficult to distinguish what methods they used, because they did work on hue and they did work tonal values together as a complete package, although they may have initially given priority to one or the other. Likewise, they may have worked vague to clear, or they may have worked simple to complex. Some remnants of that approach may remain in the final painting, but overall, when you take a very close look at the overall result, they'll generally be the same.